On a scorching afternoon in July 2019, in the high desert town of Pahrump, Nevada, 28-year-old Rachel Moreno left her shift at the Silver Sky Diner and never made it home. Her silver Honda Accord was found 3 days later, abandoned on a dirt road near the Spring Mountains, keys still in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat. Phone showing 17 missed calls from her mother. The driver's door hung open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. Inside the vehicle, investigators found Rachel's work apron, still smelling of coffee and pie, folded neatly on the back seat, something Rachel's mother would later insist her daughter never did. She always tossed it in the laundry the moment she walked through the door. For 4 years, the case remained unsolved, a mystery that haunted the desert community and left Rachel's family trapped in an endless cycle of hope and despair. Then in March 2023, a single phone call changed everything, leading to an arrest that would shake Pahrump to its foundation and force everyone who knew the case to reconsider everything they thought they understood. The question that had tormented investigators for nearly 4 years finally had an answer, but the truth would prove more disturbing than anyone had imagined. How well can you ever really know the people closest to you? The vanishing Pahrump sits 60 miles west of Las Vegas, a sprawling desert town where the Mojave stretches endlessly in every direction. Broken only by the distant purple silhouette of the Spring Mountains. Population just over 36,000. The town exists in that strange Nevada space between the glittering promise of casino wealth and the stark reality of working-class survival. Mobile homes cluster alongside modest ranch houses. The main street features a handful of chain restaurants, a couple of gas stations, and local businesses that have weathered decades of boom and bust cycles. During summer, temperatures regularly exceed 110 degrees, the heat rising from the asphalt in visible waves, making the horizon shimmer and dance. Clear as throat, the landscape holds secrets well. The desert swallows things. Everyone who lives there knows this fundamental truth. Rachel Moreno had lived in Pahrump her entire life. Born Rachel Hutchins in 1991, she graduated from Pahrump Valley High School in 2009, worked various retail jobs, married Danny Moreno in 2015, and seemed to embody the kind of steady, unremarkable existence that forms the backbone of small-town America. Those who knew her described a young woman with an easy laugh, someone who remembered regular customers' orders at the diner, who volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends, who posted pictures of sunsets and her 2 cats on social media with captions about gratitude and simple pleasures. She stood 5 feet 4 inches tall, maintained a slender build, wore her dark brown hair usually pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her co-workers at the Silver Sky Diner, where she had worked for 3 years, said she rarely called in sick, always arrived 15 minutes early for her shifts, and stayed late to help the evening crew during rushes. Her husband, Danny Moore, worked as a mechanic at Terrible Herbst Automotive Center on Highway 160. 31 years old in the summer of 2019, Danny had grown up in Henderson before moving to Pahrump for work in 2014. He was stocky, broad-shouldered, with tattooed forearms and hands perpetually stained with grease. No amount of scrubbing could completely remove. Neighbors described him as quiet, someone who kept to himself, who worked on his truck in the driveway on weekends, who occasionally nodded a greeting but rarely stopped for conversation. The couple lived in a small rental house on Blosser Ranch Road, a beige stucco structure identical to dozens of others in the development, with a struggling lawn and a carport that provided minimal shade. The marriage, according to those close enough to observe, had experienced the typical strains of young couples navigating financial pressures and limited opportunities. Rachel's best friend since high school, Jennifer Costa, would later tell investigators that Rachel had mentioned arguments, mostly about money, about whether to stay in Pahrump or try their luck in Las Vegas, about starting a family they could not quite afford. Nothing that seemed exceptional, nothing that raised alarms, just the ordinary friction of two people trying to build a life in a place that offered few easy paths forward. July 17th, 2019, dawned clear and mercilessly hot. By 6 in the morning, the temperature already hovered near 80 degrees. Rachel's shift at the Silver Sky Diner began at 7. The diner, located in a strip mall off Highway 160, served breakfast and lunch to a reliable stream of locals, construction workers, and travelers heading to or from Vegas. Rachel worked the morning shift 3 days a week, usually finishing around 2:30 in the afternoon. Her routine rarely varied. She woke at 5:30, showered, dressed in black pants and the diner's required white polo shirt, made coffee that she poured into a travel mug, and drove the 4.2 miles from her house to the restaurant, arriving by 6:45. That morning proceeded exactly as it always did. Security footage from the diner's parking lot, time-stamped at 6:43, shows Rachel's silver Honda pulling into her usual spot near the dumpster enclosure. She exits the vehicle, purse slung over her shoulder, travel mug in hand, and walks toward the employee entrance. The footage, grainy but clear enough, shows nothing unusual in her movements. No hesitation, no looking over her shoulder, just another Wednesday morning. Inside the diner, Rachel clocked in at 6:46. Her co-worker, Sandra Villanueva, remembered Rachel seeming normal, perhaps a bit tired, mentioning she had not slept well because of the heat and their air conditioner making strange noises. The breakfast rush kept both women busy until nearly 11. The lunch shift began with its own steady stream of customers. At 1:47, according to the diner's point-of-sale system, Rachel rang up her final table. At 1:53, she clocked out. At 1:56, security footage shows her walking across the parking lot to her Honda, still nothing remarkable in her posture or pace. She opened the driver's door, tossed her purse onto the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel. The security camera, positioned to monitor the back entrance and dumpster area, captured her vehicle in the far edge of its frame. At 1:58, Rachel's Honda backed out of the parking space. At 2:01, the vehicle exited the parking lot, turning south on Highway 160. That was the last confirmed sighting of Rachel Moreno alive. The drive from the Silver Sky Diner to the Moreno residence on Blosser Ranch Road should take approximately 7 minutes, following Highway 160 south, turning right on Homestead Road, then left on Blosser Ranch. Google Maps, police would later verify, estimates 6 to 8 minutes depending on traffic, which in Pahrump rarely presents significant delays. Rachel should have arrived home by 2:15, the absolute latest. Danny Moreno told investigators he was at work at the automotive center that afternoon. His time card showed he clocked in at 8:03 that morning and remained on the clock until 5:37 that evening. Coworkers confirmed seeing him throughout the day, working in Bay 3, a brake job on a Ford F-150, then an oil change on a Nissan sedan. Nothing seemed off about his demeanor, they said. He seemed like Danny, quiet, focused on his work. Rachel's mother, Patricia Hutchins, became worried when Rachel failed to answer her phone. Patricia had called her daughter at 3:15 to ask if Rachel wanted to come for dinner that evening. The call went to voicemail. Patricia tried again at 4:30, voicemail. At 6, growing concerned, Patricia tried calling Danny. He answered on the second ring. His voice, Patricia would later recall, sounded normal when he said Rachel had not come home yet, that he had assumed she picked up an extra shift or went to run errands. He had not tried calling her. He had not seemed worried. It was only 7:30, he said. Sometimes Rachel went to visit Jennifer Costa after work. Sometimes she stopped at the store, but Rachel had not gone to Jennifer's house. She had not stopped at any store. At 8:45, when full darkness settled over the desert and Rachel still had not answered her phone, Patricia called the Nye County Sheriff's Office to report her daughter missing. The dispatcher took the information, noting that the missing person was an adult who had been out of contact for approximately 7 hours. Not yet a crisis, in official terms, but enough to generate a report and begin initial inquiries. Deputies arrived at the Moreno residence at 9:23. Danny met them at the door, still wearing his work clothes, smelling of motor oil and sweat. He told the deputies essentially what he had told Patricia. Rachel finished work around 2, usually came straight home, but he had not heard from her. Yes, her car was gone. No, they had not argued that morning. Everything seemed normal. He appeared cooperative, the deputies noted, answering questions directly, inviting them inside to look around if they wanted. The house showed no signs of disturbance. Rachel's phone charger sat on the kitchen counter. Her laptop rested closed on the dining table. Clean dishes dried in the rack beside the sink. One detail caught Deputy Marcus Fleming's attention. He asked Danny when he had last actually seen his wife. Danny thought for a moment, then said that morning before she left for work, around 6:20. They had both been getting ready. She had kissed him goodbye, everything normal. Deputy Fleming made a note. The timeline made sense, but something in Danny's calm demeanor struck him as unusual. Not suspicious, exactly, but notable. Most spouses, when their partner goes missing, display visible anxiety, urgency, fear. Danny seemed concerned but measured, almost detached. The deputies left shortly after 10, promising to begin searching, to put out alerts to surrounding jurisdictions, to check hospitals and accident reports. They told Danny to call immediately if Rachel made contact. He said he would. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the yellow porch light, watching the patrol car pull away, his expression unreadable. By midnight, Rachel Moreno had been missing for 10 hours. The desert night pressed down, vast and silent, holding whatever secrets it had already claimed. The search in those early hours focused on the most likely scenarios: a car accident on a remote road, a medical emergency, a spontaneous decision to drive somewhere without telling anyone. Clear's throat, the possibility that something more sinister had occurred existed, of course, but remained unspoken in those first hours. Hope still seemed reasonable. The morning would bring answers. Morning always brings answers. Except this time, morning brought only more questions and the discovery that would transform a missing person case into something far darker. Part 2. The investigation, the organized search for Rachel Moreno, began at dawn on July 18th. Nye County Sheriff's deputies coordinated with volunteer groups, including members of the local off-road vehicle club who knew the desert terrain intimately. The immediate focus centered on the route between the Silver Sky Diner and the Moreno residence, then expanded to secondary roads and trails where a driver might lose control or experience mechanical failure. Searchers spread out in teams, moving slowly through areas accessible by vehicle, scanning ditches and ravines, looking for any sign of the silver Honda or its driver. The desert in July offers no mercy. By 9 in the morning, temperatures climbed past 95 degrees. By noon, they exceeded 105. Volunteers wore wide-brimmed hats, carried gallons of water, moved methodically through terrain where rattlesnakes sought shade beneath rocks and scrub brush. The search parties found abandoned tires, sun-bleached trash, the skeletal remains of a coyote, but nothing connected to Rachel Moreno. Television news crews from Las Vegas arrived by midday, setting up in the parking lot of the Silver Sky Diner, interviewing coworkers and customers. broadcasting footage of the search operation. Rachel's photograph appeared on local news channels and social media, a smiling image from her Facebook profile, her face open and friendly, the kind of person you might see anywhere, which made her disappearance feel simultaneously more tragic and more unsettling. She could be anyone's daughter, anyone's friend, anyone's neighbor. Rachel Moreno gave a brief interview to Channel 8 News that evening. Standing in front of his house, squinting against the setting sun, he spoke in short, measured sentences. "I just want Rachel to come home. If anyone has seen her or knows anything, please call the sheriff's office. We miss her. I miss her." His voice remained steady. His hands stayed in his pockets. He did not cry, though his eyes appeared tired, shadowed. The interview lasted 43 seconds. Some viewers later commented online that he seemed strangely unemotional for a man whose wife had vanished. Others defended him, noting that people process fear and grief differently, that judging someone's reaction in a crisis reveals more about the observer than the observed. On July 20th, 3 days after Rachel's disappearance, a rancher named Thomas Kellerman discovered the Honda Accord. Kellerman owned a 200-acre property near the foothills of the Spring Mountains, about 16 miles northwest of Pahrump. He had been riding his ATV, checking fence lines in a remote section of his land, when he spotted something silver glinting in the morning sun. The vehicle sat approximately 40 yards from a rarely used dirt road, positioned near a cluster of Joshua trees, doors closed except for the driver's side, which hung open. Kellerman approached cautiously, called out, received no response. He looked inside the vehicle but touched nothing, then immediately called the sheriff's office. Deputies arrived within 20 minutes. The scene presented numerous puzzling elements. The Honda sat in neutral, keys in the ignition though the engine was off. The battery had died, presumably from the interior lights draining power, while the door remained open. Rachel's purse rested on the passenger seat, wallet inside, $43 in cash, credit cards, driver's license, all untouched. Her cell phone lay on the center console, battery dead. The vehicle showed no damage, no flat tires, no mechanical issues that would explain why someone would abandon it in this location. The work apron, folded neatly on the back seat, struck investigators as particularly odd. Sandra Villanueva, Rachel's co-worker, confirmed that Rachel always, without exception, tossed her apron in a heap wherever she happened to be when she removed it, usually in the car. Sometimes on the passenger seat, never folded. This small detail, seemingly insignificant, became one of the first threads investigators would pull, finding that it led to larger questions about what actually happened during Rachel's final hours. Forensic technicians processed the vehicle meticulously. They lifted fingerprints, finding Rachel's throughout the interior, as expected, and Danny's as well, also expected since they shared the vehicle occasionally. They found no blood, no signs of struggle, no foreign DNA. They checked the odometer reading against maintenance records, determining the vehicle had traveled approximately 137 miles since its last oil change 2 weeks earlier. Rachel's daily commute to work and back, plus errands, would account for most of that mileage, but investigators noted the number for further analysis. The dirt road where the Honda was found led deeper into Bureau of Land Management territory, eventually connecting to a network of trails used by off-road enthusiasts and ranchers. Deputies drove the route multiple times, noting that reaching that specific location from the Silver Sky Diner would require deliberate navigation, not a wrong turn or momentary confusion. Someone would need to know the area, or at least be following specific directions, to end up where the Honda was discovered. Investigators interviewed Danny again on July 21st, this time at the sheriff's office. The interview, conducted by Detective Sarah Pacheco and Detective William Torres, lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. Danny maintained his initial account. Rachel left for work Wednesday morning around 6:30. He left for work shortly after. He expected her home by mid-afternoon. When she did not arrive, he initially was not concerned. When she still had not appeared by evening, he began to worry. No, they had not argued recently, at least nothing beyond normal couple disagreements about bills and household matters. No, Rachel had not mentioned feeling threatened by anyone or having problems with anyone. No, she had not been acting strangely or seemed upset. Detective Pacheco asked Danny about the location where Rachel's vehicle was found. Did he know that area? Did they ever go out there? Danny said he knew the general region, had driven through it occasionally, but could not think of any reason Rachel would go there. When asked directly if he had gone to that location recently, Danny said no, not in months, maybe longer. He seemed comfortable throughout the interview. Detectives noted, never became defensive, never asked for a lawyer, answered every question. Those who have spent time observing interviews of both innocent and guilty individuals know that cooperation alone proves nothing, but the quality of that cooperation. The small details of body language and response patterns can speak volumes to trained observers. One exchange in particular caught Detective Torres' attention. He asked Danny, "When you got home from work on Wednesday evening, what did you do?" Danny replied, "I came in, put my stuff down, grabbed a beer, sat on the couch for a while. Watched some television, waited for Rachel." Torres asked, "What did you watch?" Danny paused, then said, "I do not really remember, just whatever was on. Background noise, I guess." Torres made a note. In his experience, people usually remember what they were doing during significant moments, especially the hours before discovering a loved one missing. The vagueness troubled him, though it could mean nothing. Memory under stress behaves unpredictably. Deputies canvassed the area around where the Honda was found, looking for additional evidence, speaking with ranchers and property owners, asking if anyone had seen vehicles or people in that location around July 17th. No one reported seeing anything unusual. The desert keeps its secrets. Footprints in the sandy soil, even if they had existed, would have been obliterated by wind within hours. The search expanded to include cadaver dogs, trained animals that could detect human remains. For those who have ever watched these dogs work, the experience carries a particular weight. The dogs move methodically, noses to the ground, handlers watching for the specific body language that indicates detection. The teams covered hundreds of acres surrounding the abandoned vehicle. They found nothing. Rachel Moreno had seemingly vanished into the vast emptiness, leaving behind only her car and belongings, and a growing list of questions that had no satisfactory answers. Public interest in the case intensified. Rachel's mother, Patricia Hutchins, appeared on television, pleading for information, her voice breaking as she described her daughter, the person Rachel had been, the life she deserved to live. Jennifer Costa organized searches with volunteers, printing flyers, posting on social media, keeping Rachel's name and face circulating. The hashtag Justice for Rachel began trending locally. The community rallied, as small communities do when tragedy strikes, but beneath the solidarity, whispers began to circulate. Those who knew Danny said he seemed too calm, too controlled. He went back to work after only 4 days. He did not join the volunteer searches, claiming deputies advised him to stay available in case Rachel tried to make contact. He gave one more television interview, then stopped speaking to media. His behavior, some said, seemed wrong somehow, though they struggled to articulate exactly what wrong meant in this context. Others defended him, pointing out that grief manifests differently in different people. that judging someone for not performing sorrow the way others expect reveals societal cruelty more than anything meaningful about guilt or innocence. Detective Pacheco obtained phone records for both Rachel and Danny. Rachel's phone showed typical usage patterns, calls and texts to her mother, to Jennifer, to the diner's scheduling system. Her final text message, sent at 1:37 on July 17th, went to her mother. "Slow lunch shift today. Love you." Danny's phone showed equally unremarkable patterns, work-related calls. A few texts to friends about football. Nothing to or from Rachel on July 17th, which both was and was not unusual. The couple did not text frequently during workdays, Danny explained. They just saw each other at home. Cell tower data placed Rachel's phone traveling south from the diner on Highway 160 at approximately 2:03, consistent with her normal route home. The signal then showed movement northwest, toward the area where her vehicle would eventually be found, with the last ping registered at 2:34 near a tower serving that remote region. Danny's phone remained pinging towers near his workplace throughout the afternoon of July 17th, from 8 in the morning until 5:45 in the evening, supporting his alibi. Yet detectives kept returning to certain inconsistencies: the folded apron, the location of the abandoned vehicle, the missing hours between when Rachel's phone last pinged and when anyone realized she had not come home, the calm demeanor of the husband. None of these elements alone proved anything, but accumulated together. They created a picture that felt incomplete, like a puzzle with pieces that did not quite interlock correctly. Clear's throat. Investigators pulled surveillance footage from businesses along Highway 160, trying to track Rachel's movements after leaving the diner. A gas station camera captured her Honda passing southbound at 2:05. Another camera at a convenience store 3 miles further south showed her vehicle at 2:11, then nothing. No cameras covered the rural roads leading toward where the Honda was ultimately discovered. Rachel's silver car simply disappeared from the digital record, swallowed by the gaps in coverage that exist everywhere outside urban centers. Weeks passed. The initial urgency faded as leads dried up. Detective Pacheco worked the case methodically, but without additional evidence or witnesses, she found herself circling the same questions repeatedly. What happened between 2:34 when Rachel's phone last pinged and whenever she disappeared from that Honda? If something criminal occurred, where was her body? If Danny was involved, how did he manage to be at work with witnesses and time card documentation while simultaneously doing something to his wife 16 miles away? The case did not go officially cold, but the active investigation slowed. Deputies still followed tips when they came in. Detectives still reviewed evidence periodically, looking for something they might have missed. But as summer turned to fall, then winter, Rachel Moreno's disappearance joined the ranks of unsolved mysteries that haunt law enforcement, the cases that refuse to resolve, that wake officers up at 3 in the morning with questions that have no answers. The swing in the Moreno backyard hung still in the winter wind, purchased months before Rachel disappeared, waiting for the children the couple had talked about starting. The toy truck she had bought at a yard sale, planning to donate it to the shelter, lay on its side in the garage, gathering dust. Life continued in Pahrump as life does, but Rachel's absence left a wound that would not heal, a question mark that shadowed every sunset, every silver car passing on the highway, every hopeful moment that collapsed into continued uncertainty. Danny Moreno continued working at the automotive center. He paid rent on the house alone. He stopped appearing in public searching for his wife. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves, sharing observations and doubts they could not prove, theories they could not test. If Danny knew something, he showed no signs of breaking. If he genuinely had no idea what happened to Rachel, His grief remained locked inside where no one could see it. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, keeping its secrets, patient and silent, waiting for time and chance to reveal what remained hidden. And for nearly 4 years, nothing changed. The case file grew thicker but not clearer. Rachel stayed missing. Danny stayed quiet. The truth, whatever it was, stayed buried. Until March 2023, when everything shifted with a single phone call that would finally crack the silence wide open. Part 3. The silence. By early 2020, 6 months after Rachel Moreno vanished, the immediate crisis had evolved into permanent absence. Patricia Hutchins continued calling the sheriff's office weekly, asking about progress, begging for updates. Her voice carrying the weight of a mother who could not grieve because grief requires finality, and finality requires a body or confession or some concrete ending that never came. Detective Pacheco returned her calls faithfully, though she had little new information to share. The investigation remained open, she always said. They had not given up. But without leads, without evidence, the case existed in suspended animation, neither closed nor advancing. Danny Moreno sold Rachel's belongings that winter. The decision sparked fresh controversy in Pahrump's small, interconnected community. Patricia called it unconscionable, telling anyone who would listen that Danny had no right to erase her daughter's existence. That selling Rachel's clothes and furniture and personal items suggested a man who knew his wife would not be coming back. Danny, when confronted by a reporter outside the automotive center, said quietly that living surrounded by Rachel's things had become unbearable, that the house felt like a shrine, that he needed to move forward because what else could he do? The statement satisfied no one. Those convinced of his involvement saw confirmation. Those willing to believe his innocence saw a man struggling with impossible circumstances. The divide deepened. In April 2020, Danny moved out of the rental house on Blosser Ranch Road. He relocated to a small apartment closer to his workplace. A one-bedroom unit in a complex that housed mostly shift workers and single people starting over after divorces or other personal catastrophes. Neighbors reported he kept to himself, came and went at regular hours, maintained his job, lived quietly. The manager of the automotive center said Danny remained a reliable employee, never late, work quality unchanged, though he seemed even more withdrawn than before, eating lunch alone in his car, declining invitations to after-work gatherings. Jennifer Costa tried maintaining contact with Danny during this period. She felt conflicted, torn between loyalty to Rachel and uncertainty about what really happened. In one conversation in June 2020, sitting in a coffee shop in Las Vegas where they had agreed to meet, Jennifer asked Danny directly, "Do you know what happened to her?" Danny looked at Jennifer for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then said, "No. I wish I did. I wish I could give her family answers. I wish I could give myself answers." Jennifer wanted to believe him. Part of her did. But she could not shake the feeling that something remained unsaid. Some truth hovering just beneath the surface of his carefully controlled exterior. Patricia Hutchins, meanwhile, threw herself into keeping Rachel's case visible. She maintained a Facebook page dedicated to finding answers, posting updates, sharing memories, organizing awareness events on significant dates. July 17th, the anniversary of Rachel's disappearance, brought renewed media coverage in 2020 and again in 2021. Patricia appeared on television each time, her face aged beyond what 1 year should accomplish. Her voice still strong but carrying an exhaustion that came from carrying hope as a burden too heavy to put down. The case generated occasional tips. A woman in Pahrump claimed to have seen someone matching Rachel's description at a truck stop in August 2019. Investigation revealed the woman had been mistaken. confusing Rachel with a hitchhiker passing through. A man in Henderson called saying he had information about Danny's involvement, but refused to provide details unless guaranteed immunity. Detectives met with him, discovered he had no actual knowledge, just suspicions based on news coverage and a desire for attention. Each false lead consumed resources and time, but investigators followed everyone, knowing that the real break, if it ever came, might arrive disguised as just another wild claim. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have looked across the table at a face you thought you knew, and wondered if behind their eyes sits a stranger. The years after Rachel disappeared must have felt endless for anyone close to Danny Moreno. His parents, living in Henderson, maintained their son's innocence but rarely spoke publicly about the case. His coworkers walked a careful line, not wanting to believe a man they worked beside could be capable of something terrible, but unable to fully dismiss the possibility. The doubt poisoned relationships, created distance, left everyone suspended in uncertainty that corroded normal human connection. In October 2021, over 2 years after Rachel vanished, Patricia Hutchins filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Danny Moreno in civil court. The action was largely symbolic. Danny had minimal assets, no life insurance policy on Rachel, nothing substantial to claim even if the suit succeeded. But Patricia wanted formal acknowledgement, wanted Danny forced to answer questions under oath, wanted some mechanism to compel truth, or at least create consequences for what she remained convinced was his involvement. The suit alleged that Danny had caused Rachel's death through deliberate action or negligent conduct, that he had deprived the Hutchins family of their daughter, that he owed damages and answers. Danny's attorney filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that without proof of death, without evidence of wrongdoing, the suit had no legal foundation. The civil case moved slowly through the system, each hearing and motion stretching across months, the legal machinery grinding forward with the speed of continental drift. Meanwhile, everyone involved aged, wounds calcified, the sharp pain of loss transformed into permanent ache. Something shifted in Danny during this period, though what exactly remained unclear to outside observers. He grew thinner. Coworkers noticed his hands shaking sometimes when he held tools. The apartment manager reported finding him sitting in his car in the parking lot late at night, just sitting, engine off, staring at nothing. One night in January 2022, police responded to a noise complaint at the apartment complex and found Danny had been throwing furniture, his living room destroyed, his knuckles bleeding. He apologized to the officers, said he had lost his temper, promised it would not happen again. The incident went into the file, another data point that proved nothing but suggested internal pressure building towards some breaking point. By 2022, 3 years after Rachel disappeared, Detective Pacheco had retired from the Nye County Sheriff's Office. The case files transferred to Detective James Morales, a younger investigator who reviewed everything with fresh eyes, hoping new perspective might reveal something previous investigators had missed. He re-interviewed witnesses. He re-examined physical evidence. He consulted with FBI behavioral analysts about Danny's profile and reactions. The consensus remained frustratingly ambiguous. Danny exhibited some behaviors consistent with guilt, but also some consistent with genuine grief and confusion. Without additional evidence, the case stayed stuck. The desert had long since reclaimed any secrets it held from July 2019. Rain, wind, sun, and time erased tracks, buried evidence, scattered whatever might have told investigators what happened during those missing hours. If Rachel's remains rested somewhere in that vast emptiness, the odds of discovery without specific information approached zero. Hundreds of thousands of acres of desert surrounded Pahrump. Canyons, abandoned mines, ravines, caves, endless spaces where a person could be hidden and never found. The landscape offered perfect concealment to anyone who knew how to use it. Clears throat for those who have noticed small changes in people around them, barely perceptible shifts that accumulate over time. The transformation in Danny Moreno between 2019 and 2023 would have seemed both dramatic and subtle. He still went to work, he still paid his bills, he still functioned. But something fundamental had changed. Some internal structure beginning to crumble under the weight of years of scrutiny, suspicion, and questions that never stopped circling. In February 2023, Danny started seeing a therapist. He attended sessions weekly, though he never discussed the content with anyone. His coworkers noticed he seemed somewhat calmer after beginning therapy, less volatile, though still withdrawn. The manager at the automotive center, who had known Danny for 9 years at that point, said later that he thought maybe Danny was finally starting to process his wife's disappearance, finally beginning some kind of healing journey. Looking back after what came next, those observations would take on different meanings, suggesting not healing but perhaps preparation. The unburdening of conscience, or the final arrangements made before inevitable collapse. On March 8, 2023, Patricia Hutchins received a phone call from Detective Morales. The conversation lasted 14 minutes. When Patricia hung up, she sat motionless in her kitchen for nearly an hour, unable to process what she had just been told. Then she called Jennifer Costa, and together they cried, not from joy exactly, but from the overwhelming relief of finally, after 3 years and 8 months, having confirmation that Rachel had not simply vanished, that there would be answers, that justice might finally be possible. The call that changed everything had come not from Danny directly, but from a source no one anticipated, in a way that blindsided investigators and vindicated years of quiet suspicion. The truth, when it finally emerged, proved both simpler and more disturbing than the theories that had circulated throughout Pahrump's coffee shops and Facebook pages. The breaking point when it came shattered the silence completely. Part 4. The revelation, the unraveling, began with Jennifer Costa. In late February 2023, nearly 4 years after Rachel disappeared, Jennifer had been going through old boxes in her garage, preparing to move to a larger house with her fiancé. Among the boxes, she found a journal Rachel had given her years earlier, forgotten in storage. The journal contained entries Jennifer had written during a difficult period in 2018, but also, stuck between pages, several printed emails between Rachel and Jennifer from 2019, preserved from a time when Jennifer regularly printed conversations to keep as mementos before deleting them digitally. One email, dated July 10, 2019, a week before Rachel vanished, caught Jennifer's attention in a way it had not when she first received it. Rachel had written, "Danny has been acting strange lately. Last night he asked me about my life insurance policy from work, just out of nowhere. He wanted to know how much it was worth and who the beneficiary is. When I asked why he was asking, he said he had just been thinking about the future, about making sure we were prepared if anything happened. It felt weird, Jen. I cannot explain it, but something in his tone made me uncomfortable. Am I being paranoid?" Jennifer had responded at the time with reassurance that Rachel was probably reading too much into an innocent question, that couples talked about insurance and planning, that she should not worry. But rereading the exchange in February 2023, knowing what had happened 1 week after Rachel wrote those words, Jennifer felt ice in her stomach. She immediately called Detective Morales. The information reignited the investigation. Detective Morales pulled employment records and discovered that Rachel's job at the Silver Sky Diner included a modest life insurance policy, $10,000, with Danny listed as beneficiary. The amount was not substantial, but for someone struggling financially, it represented significant money. Danny had filed the claim in December 2019, 5 months after Rachel's disappearance, the minimum waiting period required by the insurance company when no body had been recovered. The claim had been denied because the company required a death certificate, which could not be issued without remains or overwhelming evidence of death. This revelation provided motive where before there had been only speculation. Detectives looked again at the timeline, the abandoned vehicle, the careful staging. A theory began to solidify. What if Danny had orchestrated Rachel's disappearance, hoping to eventually claim the insurance after the mandatory waiting period? What if something had gone wrong with the plan, or right, depending on perspective, but the lack of a body had created unforeseen complications? Detective Morales brought Danny in for another interview on March 1st, 2023. This time, the conversation took a different tone. Morales laid out the timeline, the insurance policy, the inconsistencies. He told Danny directly, "We know you know what happened to Rachel. We know she did not just vanish. Help us find her. Help her family have closure. If there are circumstances we do not understand, explanations for what happened, tell us now." Danny sat silently for a long time. Then he asked for a lawyer. The interview ended. Detectives knew they were close, could feel the case on the verge of breaking, but close meant nothing without confession or evidence. They needed Danny to talk, or they needed someone else who knew something to come forward. That someone emerged on March 6th. Danny had been seeing his therapist, Dr. Michael Chen, for several weeks.